The debasement of debt and fiat currency has arrived. Even though gold is one of the most valuable assets in general, it's not a good idea to be overweight in it during the current financialization of everything period, when asset bubbles are being inflated due to excessive leverage and a suppressionist cartel is attempting to hide this fact. Although gold's lackluster performance was obvious at the time, the real story is that it behaves more like a spring. Holding it down for a longer period of time and with more force will increase the size of the snapback reward. People who didn't understand the significance of gold before will now receive compensation for all the deception and hold-up that has gone unpunished in addition to the benefits of this era. While the October 2025 decline was sharp, it was from historically high prices that nobody had expected to be achieved so fast. Experts that provide models to predict the gold price comprehensively, however, continue to be enthusiastic about the market's long-term prospects. The run-up has occurred at the same time as the dollar's value has had its worst year ever. Most people think of gold and silver as diversification or hedging tools for their portfolios. Among the many seasoned market analysts who have spoken out against the fiat system and in favor of gold as money are Francis Hunt and Mario Innecco. Francis Hunt casts doubt on the whole storyline of the so-called milkshake theory in this video. This is all a mirage. He says it's all part of a leveraged Ponzi scheme with hidden hubs in places like the Cayman Islands. China and other Eastern economies that are more sophisticated are continuing to stockpile physical gold. Simultaneously, Mario Innecco notes that the debt of every major currency is causing it to tank. The value of the dollar has decreased by almost 96% since the Federal Reserve was established in 1913, according to data spanning a long period of time. This loss, however, is not exceptional. This is the inevitable result of a fiat monetary system where the money supply is directly proportional to the GDP. As of 2024, China's foreign exchange reserves were at $3.2 trillion, with gold holdings accounting for about 4 to 5% of that amount. There is a lot of space for continuing accumulation without reaching historically exorbitant levels, as this percentage is still below the world average for major central banks, even though it is expanding. According to Francis Hunt's research, the record-breaking Nikkei surge in Japan is due more to the debasement of the yen than to genuine economic strength. Using gold as an indicator instead of fiat currency, he points out, the purported increases vanish, revealing decades of real value degradation. Make sure you subscribe and push the bell symbol so you never miss a moment when truth meets market before we go into Francis Hunt and Mario Innecco's keen insights from their newest interview. Now let's begin. Thus, not only is their debt depreciating, but they are also relieving themselves of the pressure to borrow via the currency. It follows that a debasement transaction is indeed taking place. Due of the currency's debasement, we have referred to the Nikkei as long. The Nikkei, a new high, is reporting on it. The yen's currency impact has been nearly as bad as the dollar's when measured in gold ounces. Yes, that's correct. For all intents and purposes, it may be a light-hearted diversion from more serious matters. After all, news of the Nikkei's recent highs will get out, and many people's perspectives are undergoing a sea change. Take a look at this Nikkei over here. I'll teach you the correct way to read it. We can just disable those two drawing tools. Our main selling point is this. We have requested $74,000 for this matter over an extended period of time. The original trigger happened in the 18, including 2019 and COVID events was a given. After that, it went back to the usual circling around this time period. This is the stock market, and this is the identical illusion that all the stock market meltdown boys fell for. The charts I'm about to show you will be extremely graphic. Anyone can see this as quite bullish. On top of that, you have your head and shoulders turned upside down on that large spherical base. There, we have established a target of $74,000. A log scale, as is shown here. Its rippiness becomes immediately apparent when I remove the log scale. You can see the magnitude of the challenge and the amount of work that remains in order to reach the $74,000 aim. I will return it to the log scale once I delog it in order to make everything more proportional. But if I do this, you'll see that it really detracts from the parade perspective. To convert that to ounces of gold, I would divide it by its dollar value. Actually, it would be much more ideal if we used gold Japanese yen. I hope that my background is sufficiently detailed, so that's what you do. According to the Nikkei chart, it is correct. Regarding what you considered to be quite bullish, isn't that completely different from another round? Apologies for interrupting you, Francis. That's something I've done with the FTSE too. My possession is the Dow. Regarding actual currency or gold, it all appears to be somewhat pessimistic. I agree. That is the reason behind our repeated references to the core transaction. Stay away from the melt-up boys who will try to get you excited about NASDAQ, MAG 7, SBY, DE, JI, Dow Jones, or any other index. This was discussed a long time ago. It is increasing. To be sure, currency effect plays a significant role in that. Furthermore, if you are measuring things in gold ounces, then the assets are really depreciating in value. I'll make that modification to XAU USD. You can still see this isn't a good graphic even if you're American and use the dollar as your currency. The gold gives you more context. I would prefer not to repeat that. Pepperstone was its destination. Some of the background information has been lost. Apologies, but I'm more interested in the lengthier history about FXEM and similar companies. And such it is. There is now more history available for you to view here. Just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of folks I'm dealing with. If you're interested, I can go on a month-long trip with you. 3 months seems good to me. You are going down in gold ounces starting from 1970. Sure, you felt the major 80s surge. Whaling into the Japanese market at that time would have been a smart move. It was a long and incredibly painful descent, though, after it peaked. There has been a minor upswing recently, and the market is clearly indicating a turnaround. Very much in the realm of possibility is this rounded top with hits and that. Regardless of whether it's a minor, gold, silver, or platinum chart, my message is that you married the beauty queen. I simply showed you a perfect equity chart and then explained why it's flawed due to your incorrect accounting foundation. Mario, the most important thing is that when hyperstagflation is in full swing, as it seems to be right now, your unit of account is the dollar. And in the case of the United Kingdom, the Great British Pound is obviously no longer a viable and usable unit of account. The elderly monkey is perched precariously on a highly precarious pole. He fails to exert the necessary climbing effort to sustain his present height and thus falls into the bottomless crocodile pit. Asset valuations denominated in US dollars, UK pounds, or euros should so come to an end. All of them are demeaning. We are living through a time of debt and fiat debasement, which are essentially the same thing. My currency will be perfectly fine, and you won't have debt debasement either. Each one is an offspring of the other, and they will descend in perfect geometric lockstep. A lot of influential people claim things like there is a scarcity of treasuries or that there is a huge demand for dollars and assets denominated in dollars. Therefore, I'm bringing all this up to rebut those claims. Here I'm picturing 2 individuals in particular, but there's a milkshake set. Yes, I understand. The $1.8 trillion must be coming from the Cayman Islands Teachers Fund. I agree with that. That gigantic entity that requires $1.8 trillion to cover the lunch money of a few grandmas. Okay, now you see, and it's up to you to figure out what this means. Is this a staged Ponzi scheme, or does everything appear fine here? You should stick with the dollar and its fiat debt system if everything is okay and there is nothing to see here. Else, I am just a whiny, moany guy who asks uncomfortable questions. There may be a conflict of interest if JP is involved with main dealers who appear to be providing significant leverage for the purchase of unattractive assets. James Dimon, a partner at Morgan Stanley, publicly states that, among other things, $10,000 worth of gold should be considered. His bank is the principal dealer and issuer for the government bond market, and there is a debt debasement and fiat crisis happening at the same time. Additionally, it likely has a division that helps offshore jurisdictions like the Cayman Islands acquire with tremendous leverage. So take that for what it's worth. I can smell it. Yeah. Financial institutions that deal and trade on behalf of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York are referred to as primary dealers when Francis uses this term. Thus, yes, a specific license is granted to them. Yeah. Plus, I'd be surprised if the Fed isn't there to back them up too. I believe Francis brought up the Cayman Islands Ponzi scheme because it artificially increases demand for government bonds. Massive sum, $1.8 trillion. An enormous chunk of that $1.8 trillion wouldn't exist, in my opinion, if this basis transaction weren't taking place. I agree, and nobody would have bought it. Keep this line of reasoning going when you consider Belgium, Luxembourg, and the metropolis of London. Additionally, there have been discussions on debt in the United Kingdom and France as of late. And out of nowhere, they surpassed all but one other buyer of US debt in the most recent month. At home, you seem to be facing some debt issues. You've done a lot of levering. Credit card payments are becoming unmanageable. Your financial flow is satisfactory. In order to avoid becoming bankrupt yourself, you acquire the other end as an asset from someone else. It is completely illogical. Francis, what makes them do that? Very much so. In particular, when the price of gold is rising and the economically astute Eastern nations are stockpiling the precious metal, giving the impression that they are getting smarter by the day. China, for example, has been doing this for at least 3 decades. The official inflation statistics are extremely deceiving. Francis Hunt characterizes it as a type of official propaganda meant to mask the real decline in your purchasing power. Officials are trying to keep people's faith in a fiat system that is clearly failing by purposefully downplaying actual price hikes. You can't trust the figures they provide you with. In terms of the future, Mario Innecco expands by saying that economies flourished while inflation was almost non-existent under a stable monetary system such as the gold standard. For the current fiat system to work, inflation is essential. Inflation, according to both experts, is a deliberate ploy to enrich the wealthy at the cost of the working class and poor. Additionally, worrying signals of persistence were seen in inflation, which just surpassed 3% in September, the highest level since January. What this means is that the market is repricing gold hourly as it attempts to make sense of all the competing forces. What important are real yields, or interest rates, once inflation is taken into consideration? Many believe that when inflation rises, the price of gold automatically rises as well. Please return to the interview. Like the misinformation you see in the news feeds of every country, these inflation statistics that the government administers are just that. Propaganda. They are therefore drastically understating the situation. From what I've gathered from locals, the period for the doubling of the rice price was definitely shorter than 2 years. Getting to the top 2 or even the top 3 with particular goods that are so important to the country is just not possible. When it comes to the other products, where is all the disinflation? Statistics quirks go unrecognized. As an irritant aside, I was watching someone who is deeply interested in shark attacks, and he claims that they are significantly underreported. Therefore, divers who go missing end up with a bite wound. Well, the man had a safety issue, died, and was subsequently bit by a predator. They still don't report a shark attack even if they take a bite out of their board while bodyboarding, almost as if it were agenderized in that way. Afterwards, they discover the bite-marked corpse. Unfortunately, he became disoriented, drowned, and was devoured. Therefore, there are agendas. In the case of nations, the purpose is to hide the tax, as inflation is a tax. It's a tax on everyone, but the central bankers insist on saying it over and over again. Minimal inflation, good, managed, with an upward trajectory, so everyone thinks it's under control. The way they want to tax you is like boiling a frog. It won't be obvious at first, but it will lead to severe deflation. Deflation occurs when the purchasing power of a currency increases relative to its purchasing power in the past. For a citizen, how is it bad? The only people who can see this as negative news are the bankers who are spending too much money and amassing too many debts. This gives them the excuse to borrow more money, steal more money, and spend too much money on their pet policies. That, however, is a political matter. I have a massive macro that you may not have seen if you'll let me show you my Korean chart. Our in-depth knowledge of macroeconomics is a result of our work. On lengthy timescales, we construct expansive views. Oh, and this is the USD Korean one's technological structure too. And the previous incident was this very same thing. This will take you way back in time. The Asian crisis began during this time in the 1980s. One interesting thing about this money is that it runs when there is no bid. Even for a developed country, that may be a very thin FX. Such massive spikes are visible. A subprime mortgage crisis had occurred. As expected, this backfired spectacularly for the Koreans. They went from 900 to 1,000, and that is just on that one problem. Think about the weight you'd gain if that happened to you, Mario. In terms of devaluation for the Koreans, it's much worse than a Black Monday event orchestrated by George Soros. The squeeze has just been put up and is rapidly approaching our triggering level. As an integral component, it performed a small amount of trigger and pullback. When you consider that it's at 1439, it's more than half the distance to 2740 and the 3000 level. By the way, this goal we set for ourselves was consistently surpassed. This was all about going above and above because the goal was right here. As a result, value of this currency can fluctuate wildly whenever this occurs. Something is cooking in that area, and we don't think it will be long until it boils over if you set off this line.